Hello Internet, it's AndrewMycol and welcome to this week's Power Rangers podcast. No, the AndrewMycol Podcast, sorry. This is the AndrewMycol Podcast, the podcast where we talk about Power Rangers and Super Sentai. This week, we are going to talk about Power Rangers Universe. This was announced later last week. And I didn't talk about it in a dedicated video, but I did want to talk about it in a podcast form since I have not done a podcast in a little bit. If you do enjoy today's podcast, you know what to do. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Let me know what you want me to cover on this podcast. This is a weekly podcast. And also, if you would like to see this video one day early, make sure you head over to patreon.com/AndrewMycol2, where you will get this podcast and maybe some more content one day early. So make sure, if you want to, head over to patreon.com, and eventually I will have memberships available for Andrew Michael, so you guys will also be able to see it as a YouTube member, so you will see it one day early as well. Now, with that being said, let's get into this week's podcast. So, if you did not see last week, Boom Studios has announced they're doing Power Rangers Universe. If you have followed, I don't know why I said that. If you followed the Marvel universe, the Marvel, and movies, you have the Marvel multiverse, you have the Marvel's universe, MCU, right? They have all the heroes. They have all the villains. Everyone has a background. You have the Avengers, right? Avengers Endgame being one of the biggest movies to come out last decade, if not for a really, really long time. They have a multiverse, right? They have a universe where they have all these different superheroes. So Boom Studios is pretty much going that route. And in November, we're going to see Power Rangers Universe, a comic series about these different Rangers coming together. What would this mean? So, as you'll see on what will be my left, your right here, you see the Omega Rangers. They were in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in the comic. Up here, you're seeing the Hyper Rangers. These are the Rangers that played Heroes for the Grid. Hyperforce, that's it. They're Hyperforce, the Rangers that played Heroes for the Grid over on Twitch. You see the Turbo Rangers, where this is also going to focus on the Phantom Ranger. You see the Samurai Ranger over there, so maybe we'll get a backstory of the Samurai Rangers a little more in a different way. And of course, you have the Mighty Morphin Red Ranger. Now, I think this is absolutely huge. This is probably what might get me back into reading the Power Ranger comics myself, because I did do the comics a tiny bit here on the channel, and they did okay. It wasn't great, but I do think that these comics are very cool. Now, with it being a universe, this also could help Hasbro in 2022, 2023 if they want to expand their own little universe, right? And we see in Dino Fury where they talk about the Morphin Masters, right? And we saw where they opened this can of worms where it's like, oh, so these Morphin Masters from the comics helped the Dino Fury Rangers get the power coins. They helped the Dino Fury Rangers get their morphers. They helped the Dino Charge Rangers, the Dino Thunder Rangers. It's really interesting what they could do with their own universe, right? Because what they could also do is they could make so many different stories. Like, they could bring in different past Rangers. And I saw Deoxy360, another YouTuber, by the way, who talks about Power Rangers, talked about this. He said, well, what if they do pre-Zoo Rangers, right? What if they do like 5-Man? What if they do Car Ranger? What if they do Liveman? What if they do Jetman? What if they do Go Ranger? What if they do Battle Fever J? What if they do Jakku, right? All of these past pre-Zoo Ranger teams, and you bring them in, then it's like, if you do an anniversary, you can use all of these past teams, and you can kind of do those in the comics. Now, granted, I'm not sure what Hasbro would have to do to allow that to happen. And no, we're not going to talk about the you-know-what, because I've seen where people have gone absolutely ape crazy on Twitter talking about it. So we're not going to talk about it here. But I think it would be very interesting to see what Hasbro could pull off for something like this, right? Now, imagine you're reading the comics and you see where the Omega Rangers interact with the Turbo Rangers. That would be really cool. Or let's say you have the In-Space Rangers and they interact with, I don't know, the Operation Overdrive Rangers for whatever reason. Or you bring in the Ninja Storm Rangers and the Ninja Steel Rangers and the Samurai Rangers, have them do something in the comics, and there's just so much possibilities, right? There is so much that the Hasbro or Power Rangers universe could go with, really. And what's fascinating about this whole entire thing is it's just the unlimited possibilities of what could go on. Now, this is another very far-fetched, not gonna happen idea, but think about this. What if we get to a point in time where we see the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles not only help out the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but they help out the other Power Ranger teams, right? What if they help out the Turbo Rangers? What if TMNT helps out the Ninja Storm Rangers or the SPD Rangers, right? And think about this big one. What if you have Transformers and Power Rangers team up in a movie? Like, what if you have a Transformer movie and you see the Power Rangers show up? That would be cool. That would be really exciting for not only Transformers, but for also Power Ranger fans who have never seen these new teams, but teams that have come after, like Power Rangers Mighty Morphin, Alien, Turbo, like Zeo, like all of these teams people have never seen before, right? And if you bring in that audience that has never heard of these other teams, you can bring in kids who probably would never get excited for Power Rangers, but this would do it, right? Because there is so much possibility that is on the table now, right? And I think what Hasbro could do is they could go so many different routes with these teams. Like, you bring in a Samurai team for Dino Fury. You bring in the if they bring in the Omega Rangers for a episode of Dino Fury, that would be crazy. That honestly would be crazy. I don't see it happening, but who knows? Like, what if that actually happens? Or better yet, what if we get a Dino Fury episode with the Hyperforce Rangers? Or what if we get the Hyperforce Rangers and Dino Fury doing a crossover episode where it's like Hyperforce and Dino Fury do like this, like the Red Rangers team up, the Blue Rangers team up, and everyone teams up? That would be really cool, honestly. Like, if you are a fan of Dungeons and Dragons, you might be a fan of Hyperforce. You might be a fan of them. And if you see, like, one random day, if you see the Power Rangers Dino Fury Rangers on an episode of Power Rangers Here for the Grid, Hyperforce, something like that, that would be really, really cool, right? And imagine, you see a Dungeons and Dragons episode and you see, the Omega Rangers show up, or you see MMPR show up. Like, that would be insane. It really would be. And it's like Marvel, like, you could do so many different crossovers with this, and it's like Hasbro is trying to channel their enter Stan Lee. God bless his soul. God rest his soul, man. There is so much left on the table, and it's like, imagine you have In Space and Lost Galaxy do another team up in an episode where they take on Lord Zed, or they take on, a villain from Super Sentai. Or better yet, what if they do Sentai teams that have not come out yet, like Tokuger? They could do a Tokuger Sentai, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. Again, there's so much they could do with this, and it's almost like you have to figure out what the heck are they going to do with this, right? Like, this here could be so big for Power Rangers, right? It could be huge for the years to come, because there is so much they could tell in the comics that they could do a better job in the comics than they can in the TV shows. Because you saw what the Omega Rangers came from. without the comics, Omega Rangers wouldn't be a thing, right? And it's a different play on what happened in 1994 with Mighty Morphin Season 2, right? We saw Adam, Trini, and we saw, all the 3 original OG Rangers become the Omega Rangers, right? You saw Dax, or I think it's Dex or Dex, the almost evil version of Doggy Kruger from SPD, right? I'm just saying, this is going to be crazy. And if you want to see me cover the comics, let me know down in the comment section down below. What did you guys think about the Power Rangers universe? Are you excited? What would you guys like to see? What do you want me to do on the podcast? Let me know down in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Until next time, I'm AndrewMycol. I will see you in the next one. Go, go, Power Rangers.